You plan on just dying like this? So then, what's your plan against his otherworldly power?
Well...
So you have no real plan then, huh? Naruto, are you really prepared to die?
That's right. I'm sorry, Kurama.
In that case, there might be a way.
Wait, really?
It's a do-or-die, last stand, ace-up-your-sleeve kind of thing. Only worth trying since you're expecting to get killed anyway.
What? If you had something like that, why didn't you say so sooner?
Because it means death. Do this, and it's over. But if you don't do it, you're going to die anyway. Either way, it's not a choice to make lightly. So you have to decide, what do you want to do?
Kurama, I'm ready.
This needs no introductions. We know why you clicked. Baryon mode versus Gear 5. Naruto versus Luffy. The peak of true resolve and the peak of true freedom. These two characters and their subsequent anime being my top 2 favorites of all time for as long as I can remember. I want to give you guys the ultimate and definitive conclusion from the eyes of a super fan for both, and show how I believe this fight would go down between the two now fully awakened dreamers of the Big Three. And I won't keep you waiting. Just be sure to stick around to the end, hit that big red button if you end up enjoying our content. And this is the final verdict for Baryon mode versus Gear 5. Since our channel up to this point has prominently featured this white-haired wonder and rarely deviated too far, let's start with his scaling first. And for reasons you'll see soon enough, I'll give you a few interpretations to explain the differences between these characters. As early as the end of the pre-time skip era, Sengoku claims that an old, sickly Whitebeard still has the power to destroy the whole world. Whether you believe this claim or not, between data books, feats, and about a dozen other statements, be it all the ancient weapons claims to be a threat to the world, to Blackbeard saying he could do it twice over, there's pretty much nothing to suggest that these baselines are wrong. The contention comes in the form of how you'd gauge the power of this, as in terms of raw demonstrations of feats, the best in One Piece is still Chinchou, someone who gets one shot by Prime Garp, being able to split a continent clean in two. With statements, no matter how valid they are, your interpretation will obviously vary. So what I would consider the most accurate gauge for people at the Yonko level is multi-continental. This is backed up by the feats, doesn't contradict any databook statements, and simply lines up with the narrative of One Piece, being a bit more grounded. This makes sense for the man with the Quake Fruit being able to literally affect tectonic plates. And while planetary One Piece is a vague and debatable idea off in the future of the series, I personally think saying old Whitebeard could smite the whole world in one punch is a bit of an overestimation. With databooks, editor's notes, and feats all suggesting that this level of power is reserved for characters perhaps later on in the adventure. As for Luffy, he should scale to any or all of these metas because of his fight with Kaido, the new strongest in the verse. And since this is at least partly a Gear 5 video, I'll quickly go over all of Luffy's new abilities, as well as some old ones. When channeling his inner awakening and activating the full power of the Nika fruit, the most obvious traits gained, aside from the new drip, is a raw increase to your stats. Gear 5 makes Luffy faster, stronger, and more durable than even the likes of Kaido. This is the same Kaido who could survive the entire Onigashima raid, blitz Bounce Man Whole Cake Island Luffy, and effectively overpower Luffy to the point of death on 3 separate occasions on the rooftop. But of course, unless you've been living under a rock, inside a nuclear bunker, with armed guards protecting the premises, you clearly know that the power of the Sun God Nika extends far beyond just punching stuff really hard. Yes, that scary T-word that no debater likes to hear, Toon Force. To avoid making this video all about Luffy, I'll explain how it works pretty simply and link some stuff in the end for anyone curious about the finer details. So, Sun God Luffy isn't a rubber man. His awakening isn't turning stuff into rubber, and he's not a paramecia. This is not how it works. It's become a pretty common misconception because an out-of-context Kaido mentioned that Luffy's powers work like a paramecia before looking at the next panel where even Kaido recognized that Luffy's powers are more befitting of the Zoan type, or in simple terms, the transformation type. This explains the fancy new getup and insane durability. However, if Luffy isn't a rubber man, then what is all this nonsense on screen here? Well, simply enough, the human fruit mythical type model sun god Nika, Luffy's actual devil fruit power, is explained by the world government as the most ridiculous power in the world, granting the user the freest body of all, capable of bending, twisting, and contorting, just like someone with the properties of rubber. It is said that their powers are only limited by the user's imagination and the laughter that they bring to people's faces. What this means in the case of Luffy is that his awakening doesn't just apply rubber powers to the world around him, but instead grants him the ability to make anything from people to places take on the properties of rubber because he finds it humorous. As we see later in the manga though, this is clearly not the limit of his power, as he's shown the ability to perform absurd feats like running on air, turning his hair into a pair of sunglasses, and many more demonstrations of complete bodily autonomy. This allows him to do everything from muscle to gum giant. It should be noted, however, that while Luffy is very strong in this form, his Toon Force is still limited by the power level of those he's trying to affect, as he is shown to take damage from and still struggle against the Haki of Kaido as it nullifies his goofy Luffy powers. So to quickly review, Luffy should be at least multi-continental, debatably planetary if you squint at it, and vaguely above continental by raw feats. So how does Naruto's own fully unleashed power really stack up? Well, fortunately for us, this section should go a bit quicker because of the rules and restrictions on Baryon mode. You see, the cost of using this transformation is pretty great, so it comes with the unfortunate limitation of ridding yourself of superfluous thoughts and not using any unnecessary movements, as part of maintaining the ridiculously high buff. That's all just to say, Naruto hasn't been shown to use any ninjutsu aside from his iconic Rasengan at all in this form, relying purely on the attributes given by the red Baryon cloak. As for what abilities those are, well, this takes a bit of assumption, but aside from those stat buffs, there are 3 major abilities we can point out. One is his autonomous chakra limbs, those 9 glowing red tails that can fight and operate with nothing but a thought. The second is regeneration. While not shown in this form specifically, since he never takes any damage, all of Naruto's other QB forms have it, so it's probably fair to give it to him. And easily the most unique power he has is his lifespan shortening attacks. Because the raw materials for Baryon Chakra Mode are the life force of Naruto and Kurama themselves being successfully depleted, anyone who makes contact with Naruto in this form will have their life shortened, and while it's unclear how much time is taken away, in the case of Luffy, we know he's been shaving away at his own lifespan for years. So if you're one of the people who thinks Luffy has like a week to live, then this unironically could play a pretty big role. But to talk about this power-up and not mention the raw stat increases would just be a crime. So let me quickly go over a few different metas that have developed for Naruto. And on the absolute lowest end possible, Naruto in his Baryon mode should be planetary. Between a mountain of databook statements, in-universe claims, and just raw on-screen feats, Baryon mode being any lower is just not really possible. This is because on screen we see at least 3 different moon level feats, such as Hagoromo making the moon, Toneri throwing the moon at Earth to destroy it, or him kicking the moon in 2. These are all characters who shouldn't even be a fraction of Baryon mode's full power, as even if we say Toneri is equal to Hokage Naruto, Naruto himself had to get many times stronger to surpass Ishiki. And this is pretty consistent, as the Otsutsuki are alien space gods who travel from planet to planet, harvesting them for chakra, and Ishiki is a god even among those gods. And as for what I consider a more fair interpretation, the incomplete Ten Tails cataclysm was affecting the entire world, and there are many statements about both it and the Nine Tails being a threat to the whole planet, with characters like Jubi Madara being casually tens of times stronger than the incomplete Ten Tails, and stated to be nearing the power of Hagoromo before ever getting a second Rinnegan or absorbing the God Tree. I would say that 6 Paths level characters in general are more so in the moon to small planet level range, back in Shippuden, with Kaguya herself easily being planet level for destroying her dimension, a time-space which even Obito himself calls vast. And because Hokage Naruto was already stronger than Kaguya, Baryon mode should be at least large planet level just off the sheer increase. And while you could highball Naruto to absurd higher places using the novels, there just isn't any anime evidence to back it up. So now, on to the fight you've all been waiting for. And hello to all you strange people who decided to skip to this timestamp. You confuse me, but here's your answer. I think it should be clear to anyone who's a fan of both series that while some other matchups between these two characters might be a bit closer, This one just isn't. The lowest ball interpretation that is even reasonably acceptable for Naruto is just as good as the most charitable for Luffy. And being a bit more reasonable for both, it shows a not so negligible gap between the two fighters' stats. And even feat to feat, One Piece's best is vaguely above Continental, whereas Naruto's best is vaguely above Moon level. And if you try to use some ridiculous, super out there meta for One Piece like Star level because of some stupid river, Naruto fans could easily just point at Momoshiki destroying stars in the novel, or god forbid calling the pocket dimensions universes. And while you might think Luffy could just stall out the short time limit of Baryon mode because of his future sight precog, unfortunately, I don't see the stats lining up that way, as while both characters have a plethora of light speed scaling for their mid-tiers, in One Piece, both between the fans and the characters, almost everyone agrees that most of Luffy's light speed feats required Haki, up until at least the most recent of chapters. Whereas Naruto himself had been doing it with his raw speed ever since blitzing the Raikage. And while Future Sight would obviously have more than made up the difference for lower forms, Baryon mode has become so fast that even Six-Path Sasuke with his Sharingan can't see him. So if he's already capable of blitzing himself, and Luffy is slower, well, couple all this with greater experience, hand-to-hand skill, life-shortening chakra, and an intelligent partner in the form of Kurama, and I think as great as Gear 5th is, until he can master it and its imagination hacks, Luffy just isn't quite ready to stand up to Naruto's last joyride as the protagonist. I'm sure this take is going to be a controversial one though, so hey, if you've got questions, leave them in the comments. I always try to answer as many as possible, and if this video hits 5,000 likes, maybe we can do a part 2 featuring all the forms of these kings of shonen. Don't forget to hit subscribe while you're down there though. Check out the video in the card while you're at it. And that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.